my spooky little friends, welcome back to my channel. So I hope everyone is enjoying my new content. I had decided that I wanted to do more storytelling and sharing some stories that have happened on my channel with you guys. I'm a big fan of Storytime videos, so I figured I would try and start a series of my own. And I think that this is the perfect time of year since we're getting closer to fall and autumn's happening and Halloween is on its way. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the time that I encountered a ghostly presence in the haunted Victorian mansion that I was living in. I'm going to include pictures as well so you guys can get a very good visual on how the room was set up and what my grandmother's room actually looked like. So as I'm explaining the story, I'm going to be inserting some photos to give you guys a perfect idea of exactly what happened. So in my last video, I had walked everyone through a tour of my haunted Victorian mansion that I lived in. Now, if you guys remember, I had shown you the third floor of my home, which is where all of the bedrooms were. In the house, there were a total of 8 bedrooms. So on the floor that my grandmother's room was, there were 4 bedrooms on that level of the house. So my grandmother's bedroom was probably triple the size of any of our bedrooms. It was a huge space. It had 2 balconies which outlooked to the front of the house, which were actually walkout balconies, so they had their own little space where you can stand out there and look at the view of the lake. It was a stunning bedroom. It had a fireplace in it. I mean, whose bedroom has a fireplace in it? So my grandmother slept in this bedroom. Sometimes she would even stay in the house by herself. I was always afraid to do that. I never had the courage because I was younger and it was just such a big house, and I felt like as a child, you know, I could get lost in that house and there were so many dark corners, and I just remember making a conscious effort to never be by myself anywhere in that house. As much as I loved it, it terrified me. So one summer day, I was there and it was my mother, my sister, who's younger than me, my grandmother, and myself. So just the 4 of us were in the entire house together. My mother was downstairs preparing dinner with my grandmother, and my sister and I were just hanging out with her, staying nearby, playing in the great room, playing in the kitchen, just doing what kids do. So my mother and my grandmother started to talk, and they had realized that they needed something that was upstairs in my grandmother's bedroom. So during their conversation, my grandmother had asked me if it was possible for me to run upstairs and go grab what they were looking for in her bedroom. She had needed a book. I'm pretty sure it was referencing what they were doing in the kitchen. They were preparing dinner. I think it may have been her recipe book that she had asked me to go grab. So me, not wanting to upset my grandmother or say no to her or make her have to leave the kitchen while she was in the middle of cooking dinner, I said, sure, I'll be the one to go upstairs and grab you the book from your bedroom. I remember her describing vividly where this book was. So as soon as I went upstairs, I would have no question on where to find the book. She explained exactly where it was located in her bedroom. However, if you remember, in order to get from the kitchen up to my grandmother's bedroom, I had to walk through the grand ballroom, up the grand staircase, up 2 levels to the 3rd floor. So for me, that was a big deal at the time. I was probably 11 years old, I want to say. So in an effort not to disappoint my grandmother and my mother, I volunteered to be the one to go upstairs. So I remember just vividly, mentally preparing myself to take the trip upstairs. So I started my journey. I walked into the great room. I remember eyeing the grand staircase and I said, it's now or never. So I started upstairs reluctantly, and I passed the 2nd landing where the maid and butler's quarters were and continued up toward the very dark hallway on the 3rd floor where the bedrooms were. So once I had made it to the top of the stairs, I started to feel that feeling when you almost feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. So I remember reaching the top of the landing to the 3rd floor, and I was looking down just a dark hallway. It was the middle of the day. However, this hallway was basically pitch black except for the opening to the foyer where a little bit of light was being let in. Not much though. So I remember standing at the top of the landing, taking a deep breath, and just kind of like pushing those thoughts and that feeling aside into the back of my head and saying, listen, you got this, keep going, you're gonna be fine. So I grabbed the handle of my grandmother's bedroom. So I take about 5 or 6 steps into her bedroom, and all of a sudden something stops me. I hear the sound of a human voice standing behind me. Now where the arrow is pointing is exactly where I was standing when I heard the sound of a female voice singing from directly behind me, coming from the hallway. Now the dresser where my grandmother's book was located only a few steps away from that spot. I just remember standing there after hearing that haunting, humming, singing noise, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. So now I immediately start to freak out, stopped in my tracks, and I don't even want to turn around because what I know is behind me is an open door into a pitch black hallway, which I did anything to avoid looking behind me at all costs. And as I was standing there, I remember spotting the book on my grandmother's dresser, just exactly where she had described it was going to be. So I stood there for a second and I decided, I'm all the way up here. I'm gonna go grab that book for my grandmother. I quickly ran over to my grandmother's dresser, grabbed the book. Took me a few minutes, but I worked up a little bit of courage and bravery, and I decided to face whatever was standing behind me in the hallway. So I decided to put my big girl pants on and peer into the hallway. What greeted me on the other side was an empty black hallway. So now what I did was I peered down the hallway to the right, which was where the staircase was that I took to get upstairs. And I just remember saying, nope, not happening. I remember thinking, whatever that noise is, it's coming from outside in the hallway. So instead of me walking down the hallway downstairs, I held the book in my hand and I literally screamed at the top of my lungs to have somebody come upstairs to come get me. Now I knew how far away I was from the kitchen. The chance of anybody even hearing me upstairs on the 3rd floor was so slim. So I really had to make it known that I needed help up there. So finally, after all of the yelling, I want to say a good 3 or 4 minutes goes by until my mother actually finally hears me calling her name. So she runs upstairs, comes and meets me at my grandmother's room, and basically escorts me from my grandmother's bedroom on the 3rd floor, down the 3 landings, into the grand ballroom, back into the kitchen. So I remember my grandmother looking at me and saying, "What took so long? Like, were you not able to find the book, or did I leave it in a different spot?" And I said, "No, it was exactly where you told me it was going to be. I just actually encountered someone along the way to getting the book that I wasn't anticipating." And so I sat there and I explained every single thing that just happened. You know, she was trying to reassure me as my 11-year-old brain was running wild, but she just kind of wanted to ease my mind and reassure me and make sure that I wasn't afraid. She kind of wanted to disassociate any kind of fear that I had with the house at that time. She had said, you know, there have been nights where I've stayed in the house on my own and I've never had anything terribly scary happen to me, only to find out years later that she had actually had some quite creepy encounters in that house as well. But I even remember being a young child and sitting in the kitchen by myself, just terrified to move, just feeling that feeling when something is telling you that somebody else is there with you, or that something isn't quite right. It's just an unexplainable feeling, and I remember feeling that so many times living in that house. This was just one of the stories that stands out in my mind as one of the most scary encounters that I've had. And in me sharing these stories, my family and I have pieced together so many different stories that each one of us has brought to the table. And I would love to continue to share all of these stories with you guys on my channel in this new series. My aunt also has a very similar story to mine, which is honestly even creepier because there's a lot of backstory to her story and just validated that there was somebody or something else living with us. So if you guys are interested in seeing that next video, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you can see anytime that I post a new video. And until next time,